how we are sustained, which is what I want to talk about. One definition of sustenance is the ability to meet our basic needs: food, shelter, health, and protection. And for some people, underdevelopment is the absence of any of those things, or the inadequacy of any of those things. If there is any doubt that this is a universal concern, the United Nations in 2015 adopted a new agenda for sustainable development. And it has to do with this whole issue of sustenance. You can go find out what the 17 goals are. But it has to do with sustainable development, how we are sustained. I want to read out of the book of John chapter 21, some verses that I read during my own devotional time this week. I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. I'm not sure we have that on the system. But I'll read it from the New Living Translation, and then I'll go back to the NIV, which I use more regularly. It says, "Later Jesus appeared to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there: Simon, Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the Twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, 'I'm going fishing.' 'We'll come too,' they all said. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, 'Fellows, have you caught any fish?' 'No,' they replied. Then he said, 'Throw out your net on the right side of the boat and you'll get some.' So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, 'It's the Lord.' When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped for work, jumped into the water, and headed to the shore. The others stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were only about 100 yards from shore. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them: fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. 'Bring some of the fish you've just caught,' Jesus said. So Simon Peter went abroad and dragged the net to the shore, and there were 153 large fish, yet the net hadn't torn. 'Now come and have some breakfast,' Jesus said. None of the disciples dared ask him, 'Who are you?' They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the 3rd time Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he had been raised from the dead." I read this week, and it set me thinking about how we are sustained. Now, I'm going to say just 2 major things and develop them briefly. I'll tell you what the 2 are, and then I'll come back and go over them. The first is that we are sustained by the work of our hands. That's the first. And the second is that we are sustained by the faithfulness of God. So that's what I want to say to you. So if you miss anything I say, you got it. So let's talk a little bit about the first, that we are sustained by the work of our hands. This story is after Jesus' death and resurrection. And Peter and some of the disciples are somewhere in chapter 20, verse 14. We know that they were locked away in a room because they were afraid of the Pharisees, so they were hiding somewhere. And Peter says, "Let's go fishing." And I was wondering, why did he want to go fishing? And I thought of 2 things. One reason he may have wanted to go fishing was just to cool his brain, to go and rest and relax. You know, I thought that's a good lesson. You know, when you're under stress, you need to take a little break and cool your brain. Perhaps it's fishing, Perhaps it's playing a game. Perhaps it's taking a walk or listening to some music or reading. Whatever works for you. You know, that is legitimate. Not taking a drink and so on. You know, when you're under stress, it's good to take a break and cool your brain. So that's one of the reasons they might have gone fishing. But when I go to chapter 20 and verse 14 that I mentioned, they were so scared, I don't think they were coming out to go and relax. I think there may have been another reason. And the reason was, you see, when Jesus was there, they had a bank account. When Jesus was there. And they had a treasurer. The treasurer recently retired. His name was Judas. So they had a treasurer who was stealing the money from the bank account. But now Jesus was gone. And the treasurer was gone as well. So they had to work. Talk to me. They had to work. In other words, they had to be sustained. If we don't work, how are we going to take care of ourselves? So Peter says, let's go. He didn't say, let's go. He says, I am going fishing. And the other disciple says, yes, we will go with you. So we see in verse 3, so they went out, they got into the boat, it was nighttime. The fishermen often fished at night in that part of the world, and they would use a torch, and it allowed them to use a dragnet and to do some other things. So they would often fish at night. So they went, and we are told in verse 3 that night they caught nothing. So they fished all night, like some of us amateur fishermen. They fished all night, and they caught nothing. And the other disciples, we told, followed in the boat to, sorry. Then I dropped to verse 8. That's why I got there. Verse 8 said, the other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net. This is when Jesus came and Jesus called out to them and so on. Verse 8 says, they followed, they were towing the net full of fish. That's very interesting, right? They went fishing, they caught nothing. Now we missed out a piece of the story, right? Jesus said, throw the net on the other side of the boat. And they did so, and the net became so full that they could barely pull it in. So verse 8, this is the sequel. The other disciples followed Peter, who had jumped into the water and swam or waded to shore, towing the net full of fish. Now I want you to see something. They had to tow the net full of fish. Everybody with me? They had to tow the net full of fish. Verse 10, then Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you caught. So it's really all this talking about work. Let's go fishing then. And we said he had taken off his tunic for work. So it interprets for us why they went fishing. As they pulled the net to shore, 153 large fish were in the net. And then Jesus said, bring some of the fish. Bring some of the fish you caught. This is your work. Are you there? Bring some of the fish you caught. And then verse 11 says, Simon Peter climbed aboard and dragged the net. Have you ever seen the fishermen on the beach pulling in the net? They're what we call, is a seine they call it. Right, it's a similar thing that they did. There was a net that had weights on it that it fell down to the bottom, and then they pulled it. So just like, it's very interesting to see how they. But what you realize is hard work. It's hard work, and sometimes if you're on the beach, you may go and pretend you're helping them so you can get a fish. But it's hard work. to pull that net. I was in Tobago sometime and stood and look at them pulling that net. And as they pulled it and they laid it down neatly on the beach, and they got ready in the evening or so. I saw them going out on the boat again, and they were throwing the net. Once again, it was hard work. So Peter climbed aboard and dragged, not by himself, of course, along with the others who were there, dragged the net ashore, and it was full of large fish. So it wasn't an empty net they were pulling. It was full of large fish. And then it says, but even with so many, the net was not torn. So my first point is that we are sustained by the work of our hands. In Genesis chapter 2, we see what we might call the introduction of work. In verse 15, the Lord took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to work it. That word work means to tend, like you tend a field. So his work is agricultural work. Right? So God didn't just put man in the garden to enjoy it. He put him in the garden to work it. What some translations will actually translate the word, which is what it means to tend it. And to take care of it. So I told you about my garden. Home, I reaped my first plants and shared to my neighbors yesterday, pak choy and lettuce and so on. Don't come for any, I don't have any more to share. So they tasted my garden before I did. But I remember, you're not supposed to use the hose, right? You're not supposed to use the hose in the dry season, which we are in now. Supposed to come to an end sometime next month, I think, right, in April. So I chose my words carefully. You're not supposed to use the hose. So I try to obey the law. So I have a watering can. So I will pull my hose close to the garden, and I will fill my watering can. No, the point is not to use the hose to wet the plants. That's how I understood it, because you use too much water when you sprinkle the water all over the place. So I fill my can, and then I walk with my can and water my plants one by one by one. And when I want to put some fertilizer, I put it into my can and I fill it with water, and I water my plants one by one. If I do it in the morning, if I do it in the evening, and I have a good bit of plants. To tend a field is work. That's my point. So God said you are to tend it and take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man, you are free to eat from any of the tree of the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die. So there were some limitations. But God, when he put man in the garden, now notice what he says, you may eat of the any tree in the garden. So he was to enjoy it. But he wasn't only to enjoy it. He was also to work, tend it, and take care of it. So God introduced work. And it's very interesting, again, I'm digressing a little bit. He introduced work before he introduced marriage. It's useful to have a job if you're thinking about having a wife. And it shouldn't be the wife have the job. Hello? I know life isn't perfect, right? So I know it doesn't always work exactly like that. I know life isn't perfect, but then that is still good advice, right? In Proverbs chapter 10, verse 4, it says, lazy hands make a man poor. Lazy hands make a man poor, but diligent hands bring wealth. The idea is putting your hands to work. So we sustain ourselves by working. Proverbs 28, verse 19. He who works his land will have abundant food. But the one who chases fantasies, somebody who always have a scheme. You know people like that? They always have a plan. This next plan will bring in millions. Daydreaming. I know, you see to have fantasies is work better when you're sleeping. So there's probably something implied when it says he who chases fantasies. All your time spending lying on the couch, dreaming up the next great plan to use somebody else's money. He who chases fantasies will have is full of poverty. Is filled of poverty. Because we are sustained by work. I still present 1 point home. Only 2 points I'm making, right? Proverbs 14, verse 23. All hard work brings a profit. According to John Maxwell, if you don't succeed, at least you learn. Sometimes you work hard and you don't get the exact results. But if you don't succeed, sometimes you fail. And sometimes you learn. It's a whole book. You could read it. Sometimes you fail and sometimes you learn. All hard work brings a profit. But mere talk leads to poverty. Like the person who chases fantasies. Ephesians 4 verse 28. 2 more passages and I'm going to the next point. He who has been stealing must stop stealing. He who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with his hands. I was at a seminar and somebody was talking about the Singapore story. You know, everybody's talking about Singapore. And, you know, I just never read the story, so I went to read this story about, forget the guy's name, who was the Prime Minister, President of Singapore. Can't remember his name. But interesting thing he said, he talks about the welfare state, and he seems to have held the view that you shouldn't give people something for nothing. And he said when something is free, it is used voraciously. Interesting observation. He said when something is free, it is used voraciously. So he didn't support giving people something for nothing. It says we must work, doing something useful with his own hands. You know, hands are creative. My friend Mike Murdoch says everything you need is in your hands. Sometimes we just don't see it. He says everything you need is in your hands. It's an interesting notion. I have no proof of that, but sometimes we don't see what we have. Just doing something useful with his hands that he may have something to share with those in need. I mean, I could preach a whole sermon on that verse alone. Well, why we work. We work so that we will have, but we work also so that we can share with others. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, hear what Paul says. He says, you yourselves know, here's verse 7, how we ought to follow our example. He said, we were not idle when we were with you. We were not idle. Nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. On the contrary, we worked night and day, laboring and toiling, so that we would not be a burden to any of you. This is Paul. He said, listen, we worked. Paul was a tent maker. And when he went on his trips, he worked and paid his bills. Although he himself talks about taking care of those who work. He said, we did this not because we do not have the right to such help, but in order to make ourselves a model for you to follow. For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule: if a man will not work, he shall not eat. And then he goes on, we hear that some among you are idle, they are not busy, they are busybodies. Such people we command and urge in the Lord Jesus Christ to settle down and earn the bread they eat. And as for you, brothers, never tire of doing what is right. If anyone does not obey our instruction in this letter, take special note of him. Do not associate with him in order that he may feel ashamed. Yet do not regard him as an enemy, but as a brother. So he says, listen, although we as servants of God, we could have come and said, listen, we were entitled to support. But he said, we worked. He said, we did it so that we'll set you an example. I'm a full-time pastor. I accustomed to work. I know some friends who are full-time pastors. I pass by their house, they're working in the yard, in the garden. They're working somewhere else, all kind of stuff. And I know I told you last time about people just trying to survive, because sometimes they are not taken care of well enough and they have responsibilities to their families. But I find I probably working too hard. I'm in my office too often. So I full-time, and yet I setting up all night preparing for church today. So I need to reorganize my time a little bit. But you see, I accustomed to work. I accustomed going to an office in the morning and working till the evening. You want to take care of yourself, to be sustained, you have to be prepared to work. Sometimes you don't like where you're working. I'll just say one thing about that. Ecclesiastes 10 verse 10 says, if the axe is dull and its edge is unsharpened, more strength is needed. But skill will bring success. Now, I always say to people, I'm digressing for a minute. When you have a problem that you can't resolve, you need to learn something new. You're operating at a level that cannot solve the problem. And sometimes you need to get somebody else involved in your business so they can tell you something new, or read a book, or go a seminar, or search the internet. I solve a lot of problems by searching the internet. You have to learn something new. And the axe is dull and it's edge unsharpened. Some of us working in a place and we don't like where it is, we don't like where we are, we don't like how much we're earning. What you have to do is sharpen the axe. When you have a sharp axe, people just want to borrow it. Sharpen the axe. Sharpen your tools. When last you learned something new. You get the job 20 years ago and you're still functioning on what you were oriented to 20 years ago. You will stay where you are. You can't progress in an organization because you're paid not for being there long. You're paid for solving a problem. And the more you sharpen the axe, the bigger trees you could cut down. Bigger problems you could solve. People don't pay you because they like you. They pay you because you solve a problem for them. And when you solve the problem well, they will pay you to solve bigger problems. And sometimes they pay you just to come and sit down in an office and think. I squirrel plenty because I tell people who work with me, listen, I work by speaking. When I had to tell you something twice, I'm supposed to cut your salary in half because you have overworked me by having me speak a second time. Because when I speak, I work. When I say do something, I've worked. That's how I work. There's something I have to do with my hands, but there's some other things I just say, Akil, would you please take care of this for me? And Akil consents and says, Pastor, I will handle it. I have worked. If I have to come and tell him a second time, I'm being overworked. Worse, if I have to come to do your work, I should take all of your salary and pay myself. Hello? I have an approach to work and tell you already, you do your work. My job is to take care of your benefits. You must never have to come ask me for an increase of salary. You must never have to come ask me about benefits. That's my job. Your job is to get your work done effectively and efficiently. Are you still there? I'm teaching you a little bit about work. You probably know that already, right? I supervise lots of people, and some of them really break your heart. Like some of you who supervise people. So how are we sustained? One point I was making. How are we sustained? By the work of our hands. So if we want to be sustained well, to have our needs met well, then we have to work and be willing to work. And if we want better jobs, then we have to sharpen our axe so that we become more valuable to people. Because when you are valuable to people, people call me up. I do other things occasionally that is kind of service to me, but I get paid for it. People call me up and ask me to do things for them. I don't go looking for them. And people respect your skill or gifts. A man's gifts, the Bible says, makes a way for him and sets him before kings. Man's gifts makes a way for him. I say, if you're watching those things on the thing and say, boy, that's well done, eh? You start saying, who do that? I'm going to tell you, Sister Anne-Marie did that. And I said, well, when I have some embroidery to do, I have to call Sister Anne-Marie. Am I making sense? We sustain ourselves by work. Okay. The second point. We are sustained by the faithfulness of God. This story is a very interesting story because here they go out fishing, they fish all night, and they catch how much? Zip, zero, zilch. Nada. Nothing. Anyhow you want to put it. They fished all night, and they caught nothing. They worked all night without a satisfactory result. Tell me if you're still there. And then Jesus comes. I says, fellas, how it going? Did they catch anything? And they said, we work all night and we ain't catch nothing. And Jesus gave them an interesting instruction. He says, cast the net on the right side of the boat. Well, people who know the time tell us that fishermen often cast the net on the left side of the boat because the oar was on the right side. You know how true that might be, but that's what some people suggest. So they were doing what they are accustomed to doing. They were accustomed to doing. As they work, they're doing the work. Right? They cast the net on the left side, and they dragged and caught So morning met them still dragging. And nothing. And he says, casting that on the right side of the boat. And so they cast the net on the right side of the boat. And it says they got such a catch of fish that they could barely hold the nets. And we give them a figure later, 153 fish. It was such a catch of fish, they could barely hold the net. And then when John, it's believed, that disciple says who Jesus loved, when he says it's Jesus, Peter puts on his jacket, well not a jacket, a tunic, a coat, but they would take it out. They were strong, muscular men, they were fishermen. And they would often take it off because they're the nature of their work. So he put on his jacket and he jumped into the water and he waded to the shore. And here what he finds, when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it, and not just fish, and bread. Now, watch the contrast, right? They work all night, caught, and now Jesus comes and he calls to them, he tells them cast the net. They pull up the big net full, and then when they reach to the shore, is bread and fish. And he said to them, come and have breakfast. And then we have this side observation. None of them dared to ask him anything. And then he took the bread and gave it to them, as he did, this verse 13, and did the same with the fish. What do we learn? First thing, Jesus does not need our labor to provide for us. They caught all night, they worked, and they got. Oh, I don't want to underplay the value of work if he didn't get that before, right? But he didn't need their labor to provide for them. So while they're working and catching nothing, when they come here, bread and fish already. So while their labor was fruitless, and before they could secure the fruit of their labor, so even when he told them catch it, before they could pull it to shore to secure the fruit of their labor, when they caught the 153 fish, he had already provided for them. And notice, he had provided the same thing they were working for, plus. They didn't just provide fish. He made sure they had something to eat the fish with. They provide hops and fish. The same thing they were working and working for without a positive result. He provided for them. Our needs are not always provided by hard work, but by listening to the voice of God. Somebody told me a story after I preached last day. They say, I have to give this testimony, so I'm probably stealing the thunder. They're not here today. But they said, I had a car. You know how long they talked to me about changing this car? This car breaking down, this car getting my trouble, I need to change this car, but I know how I'm changing this car. I know I get money to change this car. And the car got in an accident like Sister Jackson house burning down. If you were here last week and heard her testimony, she gave her heart to the Lord and her house burned down. And 3 days she got a new house. The car got in an accident. And he said, I decided I'm going to, I was thinking of fixing the car. And the Lord told me, give away the car. He said, okay, I'm going to give away the car. So I'm going to tell son, so come and take the car. And while I'm thinking, the Lord said to me, listen, fix the car and give it to them. So he said, I spent several $1,000 and I fixed the car and gave it to them. And I got some money and I made a down payment on another car, and the fella gave me some time to pay off the car, and I owe the fella $34,000. I said, somebody called me up and they say, I will check you. I said, normally when they check me, they'll drop a little thing for me now. So I expecting they drop a little $1,000 or $2,000. And the person pass and they drop and say, hold this, and they go on. I said, when I open the thing, $30,000. And I just went and pay off for the rest of the car. Our needs are not always provided by hard work. You see? Okay, I don't want to conclude before I conclude. Our needs are not always provided by hard work, but by listening to the voice of God. That's why I said the faithfulness of God. So Jesus said, all night they toiled and they caught. And Jesus gave one instruction. Try the other side of the boat. Now, you can argue it was a miracle, right? Because one would think, if there are no fish on the right side, there are no fish on the left side. And this is a real big boat. And they followed a simple instruction. Elijah was by the brook Cherith, and God sent ravens. That in itself is a miracle because they brought him bread and meat. Right? Ravens are carnivores, they don't give away their food. He brought him bread and meat, and he drank water from the brook, and then we told the brook dried up. And God gave him an instruction. He said, go to a place called Zarephath. I have a widow down there who I gave some instructions. I have a widow down there who will sustain you. I was working one place. I was driving down from Port of Spain one day. And I was driving down from Port of Spain one day, I lost a leave. Most places I left in a day, I told you. And I had a meeting that evening, I called the chairman of my board outside and say, I'm resigning. I just wanted to let you know before I tell the meeting. It was Wednesday evening. And in between that, of course, I talked to my wife. Say, yeah, wife, you lost your leave. And my wife said leave. So she agreed, we starving together. I can't starve when you're obeying God. And so, night, I know our meeting finished 10 o'clock in the night. Next morning, the phone rings. A friend of mine. And here how we start the conversation. When are you leaving so-and-so? I have a job for you. It's Thursday morning. When are you leaving so-and-so? I have a job for you. God does not need our labor. You see, when we see the world from this perspective, that's what we think. God does not need. So we have to work, right? You get that point already, and we shouldn't be slack about work. But we must understand that God does not need our labor to provide for us. Our needs can be provided by listening to the voice of God. I tempted to tell you another story, but I shouldn't. Joshua 1 verse 8 says, "Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful." It's about the word of God, the Torah, the Jews will call it. The law, the whatever. But it's the word of God. He says, if you observe to do what's written in it, listening to the voice of God, he said you will be prosperous and successful. You will be prosperous and successful. Not just by working hard. They worked all hard and got nothing. You will be prosperous and successful. Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 18, "But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant which he swore to your forefathers as it is today." It's not just by your hard work. He gives you the ability to produce wealth. Psalm 128 verses 1 and 2, "Blessed are all who fear the Lord, who walk in his ways. You will eat the fruit of your labor. Blessings and prosperity will be yours if you fear the Lord and walk in his ways." 1 Timothy 6 verse 17, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, not to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for enjoyment." Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous, willing to share. In this way they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Matthew 6 verse 25. And I'll probably end this point with this. "Therefore I tell you," Jesus speaking, "do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Isn't life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes?" Sustenance, you know. It's sustenance he's talking about. Look at the birds of the air. He says, they do not work. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. And he says, are you not much more valuable than they? In other words, if he takes care of them and you are much more valuable than they, will he not take care of you? And you worry, why do you worry about clothes? See how the ladies of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. They don't do no embroidery like Anne Marie. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor, as one of the richest men who ever lived, was dressed like one of these. If God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? So do not worry saying, what shall we eat, what shall we drink, what shall we wear? The pagans run after those things as people who have no faith in God. If I put my 2 points together, it's work hard, but understand that work is not the only way God takes care of us. Work hard, but also have faith in God. and trust God to take care of you. Until that talking, this is about our financial responsibilities. And what they're talking about, all them stuff, work and trusting God and so on. You know, I suppose if you psychologists and so on will tell you this, and positive thinking people, you know, your life really shaped by what you think. In the scripture it puts it this way: as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And you know, our behavior is shaped by what we think, by how we see the world. So 2 points and I'm done. Our giving is determined by our view of how we are sustained. Our giving is determined by our view of how we are sustained. If I believe that I am sustained by the work of my hands, then I will hold on to everything my hand works for. I can become cheap and insensitive to others. I pay no tithes, I give no offerings, I support no projects because I need to keep the work of my hands to take care of me, because this is how I am sustained. Whereas if I have perhaps a different balance, yes, I'm sustained by work, but I'm also sustained by the faithfulness of God. So therefore, if I am faithful to God, God takes care of me. God takes care of me. You know, like my friend Mike Bullock will also say, you know, you can never work for everything you need. You need something else. You can never work for everything you need. Everything you want in life, you can never work for it. You might work, you have to work. Most of us, the average ones, there are some who, you know, the average ones of us. That's why we have economists, always tell economics is about scarcity. Never have everything you need. So my giving is not determined by how much money I have. It's determined by how I see, how I am sustained. And if I believe that I am only sustained by the work of my hands, then I need to hoard that which I work for, because this is what sustains me. Are you there? The downside of that is that if this is what sustains me, and I live by the basis of this that sustains me, then I will always have to be sustained in this way. And when I fall short because I am sustained solely by the work of my hands. So I only count dollars. And I can never do anything beyond the dollars I see. But when I believe that I am also sustained by the faithfulness of God, then I can go beyond the dollars I see. And I can trust God to find fish on the other side of the boat. When I toil all night and catch nothing. Our giving is determined by how we see, how we look at life, how we look at this issue of sustenance. So my encouragement is work hard. I think I made that point. Sharpen your tools so that you can progress and be promoted and get better jobs and do better for yourself. But also remember that we have a source outside of ourselves. So the last point is this: God can take care of us in spite of our limitations. God can take care of us in spite of our limitations. When I chose to come to Marabella, I can't tell the detail, but you know, I gave up a great deal. I won't tell you how much salary I gave up. That don't matter. And that's why I'm not telling you the detail, because that's not the point. And I can't tell you some of what the Lord has done. See, and people taping me, and so I'm going to put me on Facebook. Or my business. I can't tell you. These fellas tell me they want to stream live at them. I don't like the streaming live because I just see all kind of craziness tonight. I got to now behave myself and remember that I'm talking to the whole world and so on. Now, so I have to be nice and well behaved. I mean, be more careful about what I say and so on when you're streaming live, you know. Because, and for the sake of my wife is a little bit more private. You know, I tell you that already. I wouldn't tell you. I wish I could tell you. You know. I ain't gonna tell you. You know, amazing. Amazing. When I walked away from that job, that was my major source of income. It was my major source of income. When I walked away from it. And God says, time to leave it. And I'm not recommending that here. You understand? Say, you ought to hear the voice of the Lord for yourself. You know, you don't take my story and go and leave your job and then come and tell me I tell you leave your job if I have a work in the church for you. You have your own relationship with God. You might tell me do some stuff He wouldn't tell you do. He might tell you go do a master's degree, go do it. Are you following me? Your own relationship with God. Right? God can take care of us in spite of our own limitations. It says, do we believe this or not? Finish with story. I don't know what story. I didn't tell all kind of stories. By the time we finish the story, I tell them old people there's plenty stories. You just forget which story you tell and you tell it over and, you know. I ain't so old, but, you know, again, some of the traits of the more mature. You know, telling stories and repeat. And you have more stories to tell as you get older, you know. Yeah. What story was that? Yeah, but I tell this story already. You know, I walked away. You know, and it was... I'll tell you one more thing, and I finish. One more thing. I came to Marabella, I said this to God. I said, God, you know what I'm walking away from. And when I come to Marabella, I must have no change in the standard of my living. That's what I believe God for. So you got nothing to do with that. That's what I believe God for. Because God honors us. You see, I've learned this throughout my life. I tell money is not I don't fuss about it. I've learned this throughout my life. When you honor God, God takes care of you in ways that you cannot begin to imagine. But when you're faithful to God and when you give to God, God takes care of you in ways that are far beyond any resources you could ever have. If I tell you, I can't tell you. I'm itching to tell you, but I can't tell you. No, I can't tell you. I can't tell you. You know, you might hear rumors sometime and figure it out, but I can't tell you. Can't tell you. You know, God takes care of us. Right? So we serve God with open hands. I don't depend on this to sustain me. Now, I am a very serious, I don't make joke with money. Every evening I come home, I sit at my desk in front of my computer and I balance my books. And me and my wife fall out because she didn't give me the credit card slip she used for the day. And when I'm asking for it, well, I'll get it for you later, and that don't really work for me by the end of the day, because when you go to mall and you use that card, nobody must be, the card decline, and you wonder why the card decline. I don't make joke with managing my financial affairs. So I'm not talking to you about being careless. Are you following me? But learning how to trust in God. Learning how to trust in God. Amen? Right, I'm done.